Well, let's orient ourselves in the research process here. The first goal of political research is to define and measure concepts. We spent quite a bit of time doing that in the first couple of chapters of the book. We learned to clearly define a concept that we want to measure, determine how to measure the concept accurately, select variables that measure the concept precisely. The second goal of political research is to propose and test explanations for political phenomena. We want to answer why questions. This is really the essence of political analysis, is to answer why questions. Why do some people attend religious services weekly while others never attend? Why is there variation in this variable? It's a kind of question that invites a causal explanation. I've often wondered, why do some students prefer to sit at the back of the class, others prefer to sit in the front? There seems to be a systematic difference. Students will be sort of those who always sit in the front no matter what class they're in, and those who always sit in the back. It seems like a trivial and maybe a mundane question, but it's a kind of process you go through all the time. In this chapter, we're going to learn how to discipline that process that you often go through. Why do some people favor abortion rights while others are opposed? That's a frequently asked question. Why do some people vote where others do not? There are two elements to a why question, if you analyze and, I guess, dissect the why question. The first is a why question cites a variable. Here are the examples we just looked at. Attend, not attend. Of course, we might have several different values of religious attendance, but you can think of it as a variable. Just some attend and some do not. Some students sit at the back, some at the front. Favor, oppose abortion rights, voted, did not vote. So these are variables that are cited in why questions. Why questions always seek a causal explanation. Each can be recast into the form, what causes differences between individuals on this variable? What causes some people to vote and others not to vote? What causes some students to sit in the front or in the back? Causal processes. Now, here's a distinction that's important, and it may be familiar to you. In the context of a causal explanation, the dependent variable represents the effect. The independent variable represents the cause. So if I'm wondering why some people are pro-choice and some are not pro-choice on abortion, that would be the dependent variable. I'm looking for a causal variable, an independent variable that might help me explain that. Why do some people vote and others do not vote? In that context, the voting and not voting, that behavior, that variable is the dependent variable. And the independent variable would be the cause that I come up with that would plausibly be connected to voting and non-voting. Like, for example, if I think that educational attainment causes people to vote, then education is the independent variable and turnout is the dependent variable. Now, when we think up explanations for something we're interested in, there are certain features of an acceptable explanation. And of course, the opposite of those features would be an unacceptable explanation. An acceptable explanation describes, really in some detail, a connection between the dependent variable and the independent causal variable. To go back to the education and turnout example, I couldn't just assert that education causes turnout. I would have to get into that linkage and expose all the connections that I think go on between one variable, the causal variable, educational attainment, and the other variable, which is the turnout. So you describe a connection. An acceptable explanation asserts the direction or tendency of the connection. That means I don't just say that education and turnout are related. I say that as education increases, turnout goes up. So I have a clear idea in the explanation of what direction the causation is running. And an acceptable explanation is testable. In fact, it might foster several testable ideas. A good explanation can be very fruitful in that way. A good explanation does not have to be correct. I know I've emphasized this before, but it needs to be testable to find out if it's correct. And a good explanation always requires some thinking and some writing. Now, here's the example in the book, and this is what I mean by, right, this is a long paragraph that describes a theoretical connection between partisanship, independent variable, and gun control opinions, dependent variable. When people enter early adulthood, they often have only basic orientations toward politics. Partisanship is one of these orientations. In much the same way that children adopt the religious denomination of their parents, children tend to adopt the party loyalties of their parents. A person who is raised in a Democratic household is likely to identify with the Democrats, whereas a person raised in a Republican household is likely to identify with Republicans. These partisan orientations may be basic, but they become useful later in life when people are deciding their positions on important political issues. Democrats will look at the issue positions of Democratic opinion leaders, Democratic members of Congress, for example, and adopt those issue positions themselves. Republicans will look to Republican opinion leaders. Gun control is a case in point. Gun control is one issue that divides Democratic and Republican opinion leaders. Democratic opinion leaders from the presidential and congressional levels to state and local governments have advocated stricter measures on guns. Republicans have opposed new gun control measures. The opinions of ordinary citizens have followed this lead. Therefore, Democrats would be more likely than Republicans to favor gun control. Well, that's a lot of talking and writing, but that's the essence of it. I mean, think of all the hypothetical connections that are proposed in this explanation. The thing about this, one thing about this explanation is I don't have any idea if it's correct, but I do know this. All of the connections proposed in this explanation are testable to find out if they're correct. That's the key. What makes this a good explanation? Let's review and look at it. 1. It describes a connection between the dependent variable, gun control opinions, and an independent variable, partisanship. Differences in gun control opinions depend on differences in partisanship. 2. It asserts the direction or tendency of this difference. Democrats will be more likely than Republicans to favor regulation of gun ownership. And 3. It is testable. If we find that Democrats and Republicans do not differ in their gun opinions, then we can seriously question or discard the explanation.